How has the evolution of sound affected motion picture filmmaking? How did sound shape and influence motion pictures over the course of film history? And what sound innovations do you think have been the most important in creating the modern cinema? Hi everyone, my name is Sylvester Andre Poole III. I'm from Newport News, Virginia, and today I'm going to attempt to answer these three questions in this podcast, The Evolution of Sound. Now, before there were films with sound, there were films without sound. Logically, these films were called silent films, but they still made themselves heard through intertitles or title cards and musical accompaniment. These silent films were the norm in the early 1900s. Many people liked using their imagination and their own creativity to assume what would be said and assume the emotions of the characters. They liked thinking of what the plot might be and used the music to understand the meaning of the film. Another good thing about silent films was that film production became a little bit easier. At one time, production crews couldn't be as mobile because of their equipment. With the innovation of lighter and smaller film equipment, they could be more mobile. When sound came along, they reverted back to not being as mobile because of the big, heavy sound equipment. Also because there was no speaking in films during that time, many foreigners were involved in acting in the United States. Even after all of this, the transition of sound still had a long way to go. Some of the first attempts to synchronizing sound were done in the late 1800s. There was William Dixon's attempt in 1895 with the kinetoscope and German inventor Oskar Mester in 1903 with the biophone. There were many failures to adding sound to films before a successful one was made. Even Thomas Edison gave it a shot with the kinetophone in 1913. His and the other attempts failed because they were either too expensive, couldn't keep synchronization, or amplify enough sound, or something else. On the amplification side of things, Lee DeForest gave a great contribution that revolutionized sound as we know it by developing the phonofilm in 1923. This sound-on-film technology was huge for the development of talking pictures. Then in 1926 came the Vitaphone. This sound system was able to synchronize sound and picture, but it used a 17-inch lacquer record, not sound on film. Unfortunately, it always lost sync because the film would break during projection. The early sound cameras and equipment were huge and noisy, but someone finally had the idea to move the microphone from the noisy equipment by putting it on a stick called a boom. But because actors had to speak to a static or unmoving microphone, early sound films were very static themselves. The fluidity that camera movement once achieved had to find itself once again. Some of the problems with early sound film can be seen in the musical Singing in the Rain from 1952. Lastly, the one genre that would have not been possible without sound was the musical. Some great example musicals are The Jazz Singers from 1927 and Broadway from 1929. Sound has revolutionized the filmmaking industry and continues to make leaps and bounds in many films today with special sound effects and different musical scores. Some examples of these are The Matrix, Star Wars, and Transformers. I hope you've enjoyed my podcast and you've learned a lot about the evolution of sound.